Emperor Zarthik stepped down from his crystalline throne, his massive frame moving with the fluid grace of a predator despite his ancient age. The throne room's walls displayed real-time images of the Kethmori fleet surrounding the fortress. Moon, thousands of ships representing centuries of conquest and domination. "You interest me, Jake Morrison," the Emperor said as he circled around the blind human who stood calmly in the center of the chamber. "In 300 years of rule, I have never encountered a creature quite like you." Jake could sense the Emperor's movements through electromagnetic patterns and air displacement. The ancient ruler was testing him, probing for weaknesses while trying to understand how a blind human could navigate so confidently through his fortress. "Your ancestors were slaves once," Jake observed. "The records in your archives tell the whole story. You know what it feels like to be considered inferior by a more powerful species?" "Indeed," Zarthik acknowledged. "My people suffered under the Vorthani for millennia before we finally broke free. They thought themselves superior because of their advanced perception abilities. We proved them wrong. And then you became exactly like them," Jake said. "You built an empire based on enslaving others, convinced that might makes right. You forgot what it felt like to be powerless," the Emperor laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "We remembered perfectly. That is why we ensure no other species can threaten us the way we threatened the Vorthani. The strong survive while the weak serve. This is the natural order." "The natural order according to tyrants," Jake replied. "But humanity has a different perspective on strength and weakness." Zarthik moved closer, his bio-enhanced senses studying Jake intently. "You intrigue me, human. Your species shows potential that could be useful to the Empire. Join me as my general, and together we could expand our dominion across the galaxy. Your enhanced abilities combined with Kethmori technology could make us unstoppable." "I've seen what your empire does to those it conquers," Jake said firmly. "Slavery, torture, ritual mutilation of anyone who resists. I won't be part of that system." "Then you will die defending an inferior species that cannot appreciate your sacrifice," the Emperor snarled, his diplomatic mask finally falling away. "Better to die free than live as a tyrant," Jake responded. The final battle began with Zarthik unleashing the full power of his biomodifications. Energy crackled around his body as he moved with impossible speed, his claws extending into razor-sharp weapons. The throne room itself became a weapon as hidden systems activated, firing energy beams and creating force barriers to trap Jake. But Jake had been preparing for this moment since the day Vexthara took his sight. Every battle, every challenge had honed his abilities to their absolute peak. He moved through the Emperor's attacks like water flowing around stones, his enhanced awareness mapping every danger before it could touch him. The Emperor's centuries of experience meant nothing against an opponent who could perceive attacks through electromagnetic signatures before they were even launched. Jake's enhanced reflexes allowed him to counter moves that should have been impossible to detect or avoid. "How do you do it?" Zarthik demanded, as his most devastating attacks failed to connect. "No creature should be able to fight like this without sight." "You taught me," Jake said as he pressed his attack. "Every act of cruelty, every moment of suffering you inflicted made me stronger. You tried to break my spirit and instead forged it into something unbreakable." The battle raged across the crystalline throne room, with ancient technology clashing against human determination. Zarthik's bio-enhanced strength was formidable, but Jake's unique perception gave him advantages the Emperor couldn't counter. Every energy weapon had a distinctive signature. Every movement created detectable patterns. As the fight continued, Jake realized that Zarthik was growing desperate. The ancient Emperor had built his entire identity around being the ultimate predator, but now he faced prey that had evolved beyond his ability to hunt. The psychological impact was devastating for a creature who had never known true defeat. "Your empire ends here," Jake said as he landed a decisive blow that sent the Emperor crashing into his throne. 300 years of tyranny stops today." Zarthik lay broken against the crystalline seat of power, his ancient body finally failing after centuries of bio-enhancement. But instead of rage or fear, his eyes showed something unexpected: relief. "Perhaps it is time," the Emperor whispered. I have carried the fear of my ancestors for too long. The cycle must end somewhere. Jake stood over the fallen Emperor, feeling no satisfaction in victory. It doesn't have to be about conquest and domination. Species can coexist without one. Enslaving another? Prove it. Zarthik said with his final breath. The Emperor's death triggered automatic systems throughout the Fortress Moon. Kethmori commanders across the fleet received notification that their absolute ruler was gone, leaving them confused and leaderless. Some prepared for battle while others waited to see what would happen next. Jake made his way to the Imperial Communication Center and activated the fleet-wide broadcast system. His image appeared on screens throughout the Kethmori Armada, the blind human who had somehow infiltrated their ultimate stronghold and defeated their God Emperor. My name is Jake Morrison, he began, his voice carrying across space to reach. Every ship in the fleet. I represent the liberated humans of the former Kethmori slave colonies. Your Emperor is dead, but I'm not here to gloat over his defeat. Shocked murmurs rippled through alien crew members who had never imagined their empire could fall to a single human. I'm here to offer you a choice, Jake continued. You can continue the cycle of conquest and oppression that has defined your species for centuries, or you can join us in building something better. A federation where different species work together as equals instead of masters and slaves. Some Kethmori commanders immediately rejected his offer, choosing to attack the Fortress Moon rather than accept leadership from a human, but others hesitated, remembering their own ancestral history of enslavement and wondering if there might be another way. The battle for the fleet's loyalty raged for hours, with ships switching sides as crews debated among themselves. Jake's message had planted a seed of possibility that many young Kethmori found appealing. They had grown up hearing stories of their oppressed ancestors and questioned why they needed to oppress others. When the fighting finally ended, nearly half the Imperial fleet had declared loyalty to Jake's vision of a galactic federation. The other half retreated to distant systems, vowing to rebuild their empire and reclaim their dominance. Jake's first act as leader of the new federation was to destroy the ritual blinding chambers on every world under his control. The practice that had been used to break the spirits of resistant slaves was outlawed forever, replaced with systems that promoted cooperation instead of domination. Standing in the ruins of the crystalline throne room, Jake addressed representatives from dozens of liberated species who had come to witness the birth of their new government. He chose not to claim the Emperor's throne for himself, instead establishing a council where every species had an equal voice. Today we prove that strength isn't about crushing those weaker than ourselves, Jake said to the assembled delegates. True strength comes from lifting others up, from building something greater than any of us could achieve alone. As news of the Federation's founding spread across the galaxy, humans throughout known space felt a surge of pride. One of their own had taken the worst thing that could happen to a person and turned it into the foundation for galactic liberation. Jake Morrison had lost his sight but gained something far more valuable. The vision to see a better future for all thinking beings. The blind commander who had started as a broken prisoner in an alien mind had become the architect of a new age, where no species would ever again suffer under the boot of tyranny. His legacy would endure long after his own life ended. Proof that the human spirit could overcome any obstacle and transform even the greatest darkness into brilliant light. The fortress moon of Thekvar hung in space like a crystalline jewel, its surface covered with defensive installations and energy shields that could repel entire fleets. Emperor Zarthik had retreated to this stronghold with his remaining forces. Confident that no enemy could penetrate its ancient defenses, Jake Morrison approached the fortress alone in a small infiltration craft, leaving his fleet hidden in the outer system. His enhanced senses had mapped every energy pattern and defensive grid through careful observation of intercepted communications. What looked impossible to normal vision was simply another tactical problem to solve. Jake, this is insane, Lisa. Thompson's voice crackled through his communicator. Let us come with you. You don't have to do this alone. The fortress sensors will detect a larger force immediately, Jake replied as he guided his ship through the defensive perimeter. But one small craft might slip through unnoticed, especially if the pilot knows exactly where the blind spots are. Jake had studied the Fortress Moon's design extensively and discovered something remarkable. The Kethmori had built their ultimate stronghold to intimidate enemies through visual magnificence rather than pure defensive efficiency. The massive crystalline spires and elaborate energy displays created gaps in sensor coverage that his enhanced awareness could exploit. He piloted his craft through a complex maze of defensive satellites and energy barriers, using electromagnetic patterns to navigate where others would rely on visual guidance. His ship slipped past automated defenses that were designed to track conventional vessels but couldn't detect his unique approach methods. The fortress interior was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers carved from living crystal that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. The Kethmori had designed it to confuse and disorient intruders, but Jake moved through the passages with perfect confidence. His enhanced senses turned their psychological warfare against them. Deep within the fortress, Jake discovered the Imperial archives containing the true history of the Kethmori Empire. Ancient records revealed that the Kethmori themselves had once been slaves to an even more advanced civilization that had vanished millennia ago. Their current empire was built upon the ruins of their former masters. "The cycle continues," Jake murmured as he absorbed the historical data. The Kethmori had overthrown their oppressors only to become oppressors themselves, enslaving other species out of fear that they might suffer the same fate again. The records revealed the truth about their ritual blinding of resistant slaves. It wasn't just cruelty, but a desperate attempt to prevent other species from developing enhanced senses that might threaten Kethmori dominance. Their ancestors had learned to perceive beyond normal sight during their own enslavement, and they feared others might do the same. Jake continued deeper into the fortress until he reached the throne room, where General Vexthara waited for him. The alien commander had survived their previous encounter and now sought personal revenge against the human who had humiliated him. His crystalline armor was more elaborate than before, enhanced with biomodifications that made him faster and stronger. "At last, the blind insect comes to face justice," Vexthara hissed as Jake entered the vast chamber. "You have caused enough trouble for our empire." "I've caused trouble for tyrants and slavers," Jake replied calmly. "That's what humans do when we're pushed too far." The battle between them was epic, with Vexthara using advanced holographic systems to create multiple false images of himself while wielding energy weapons that could cut through solid metal. But Jake's supernatural awareness allowed him to identify the real alien immediately, while the holograms meant nothing to his enhanced senses. Jake moved like a dancer through the throne room, his body flowing around attacks while his enhanced reflexes guided precise counterstrikes. Vexthara's superior strength and armor meant nothing against an opponent who could predict every move before it happened. "Impossible," the alien general gasped as Jake's captured energy blade pierced his chest armor. "You should be helpless without sight." "You never understood what you created when you took my eyes," Jake said as Vexthara collapsed. "You tried to break me and instead forged something stronger than you could imagine." The dying general looked up at Jake with something like wonder in his dark eyes. "You have become what we fear most? A creature that sees without seeing, that hunts without being hunted. You are what the old masters were before we destroyed them." Jake felt a chill as he understood the implication. The Kethmori weren't afraid of human rebellion. They were terrified that humanity might develop the same enhanced perception that had made their ancient enemy so dangerous. By blinding him, they had inadvertently created exactly what they feared most. "The Emperor waits for you in the upper spire," Vexthara whispered with his last breath. "He has been expecting someone like you for 300 years. Jake made his way through the fortress to the Imperial Spire, his enhanced senses guiding him past automated defenses and energy barriers. The closer he got to the Emperor, the more he understood about the true nature of the Kethmori Empire. They weren't conquerors driven by ambition, but survivors driven by ancient fear. The crystalline throne room at the top of the spire overlooked the entire Kethmori fleet. Thousands of ships hung in space around the fortress moon, representing the military might of 40 star systems. At the center of it all sat Emperor Zarthik. On his throne of living crystal, the ancient ruler was massive even by Kethmori standards, his biomodifications extending his lifespan far beyond normal limits. But Jake could sense weakness beneath the imposing exterior. Zarthik was afraid, had been afraid for centuries, and that fear had shaped every decision he made. "So, you are the human who thinks he can challenge an empire," the Emperor said as Jake approached the throne. His voice carried the weight of 3 centuries of absolute power. "I'm the human who refuses to let anyone tell him he's inferior," Jake replied. "My name is Morrison, and I represent everyone you've enslaved and brutalized." Emperor Zarthik rose from his throne, his ancient eyes studying Jake with interest rather than anger. "Do you know what you really represent, Jake Morrison? You are proof that the cycle is beginning again. Another species is developing beyond normal limitations, just as my ancestors did long ago. Then maybe it's time to break the cycle instead of perpetuating it," Jake said. Emperor Zarthik received the news of General Vextara's defeat in his crystalline throne room overlooking the Kethmori home fleet. The ancient ruler had governed the empire for over 300 years, expanding their dominion across 40 star systems. Never before had a slave rebellion succeeded on such a scale. "Find this blind human and bring him to me alive," the Emperor commanded his shadow caste assassins. "I want to understand how a damaged creature could threaten our empire." The shadow caste were the Emperor's most elite warriors, genetically modified and trained from birth to be perfect killers. Their bioengineered cells could bend light around their bodies, making them nearly invisible to normal vision. They had never failed to capture or eliminate a target. Jake Morrison had become a legend throughout the human resistance network. His forces now controlled mining operations on 12 worlds and had captured enough Kethmori equipment to outfit a small army. The aliens called him the Dark Commander, while humans whispered that he could see in complete darkness and predict enemy movements before they happened. The first shadow caste assassin arrived at the captured mining facility on Kepler 442b. During what should have been a routine supply run, the creature moved through the tunnels like liquid shadow, its modified physiology rendering it invisible to human guards. It expected to find Jake Morrison and eliminate him quickly. Instead, Jake was waiting in the exact spot where the assassin planned to attack. "I can hear your heart beating," Jake said calmly as he stood in the darkened tunnel. "Your stealth technology creates electromagnetic distortions that stand out like a beacon to my senses." The assassin was stunned. No creature should have been able to detect a shadow caste warrior using their biological camouflage. But Jake's enhanced awareness picked up the subtle energy fields generated by the aliens' modified cells. The stealth system that made them invisible actually made them easier for him to track. The fight was over in moments. Jake's enhanced reflexes and spatial awareness allowed him to counter every attack while the assassin struggled against an opponent who seemed to anticipate its every move. When the creature fell, Jake examined its biomodifications with scientific curiosity. "Interesting," he told Danny Rodriguez later. "They've engineered themselves to be perfect hunters, but they've made themselves dependent on visual stealth. Against someone who doesn't rely on sight, they're actually at a disadvantage." 3 more shadow caste assassins arrived over the following weeks, each using different tactics and approaching from different angles. Jake eliminated them all with increasing efficiency. His reputation grew as word spread that even the Emperor's elite killers couldn't touch the Dark Commander. Emperor Zarthik was forced to take personal interest in the situation. No single human should have been able to threaten the stability of his empire. He began studying reports about Jake Morrison, trying to understand what made this particular creature so dangerous. "He fights like he can see everything around him," one surviving Kethmori officer reported. "Our soldiers say he moves through darkness like it's bright daylight. Some believe he has supernatural powers." Jake used his growing reputation to expand resistance operations throughout the empire. Human slaves who had given up hope began to believe that freedom was possible. Sabotage incidents increased dramatically as workers gained confidence in their ability to resist. The Emperor decided to hunt Jake Morrison personally, bringing his most advanced warship and a full battle group to the Kepler system. But Jake had anticipated this move. Using captured Kethmori ships and his knowledge of their tactical preferences, he led the Emperor's forces into a deadly game of hide and seek among asteroid fields and abandoned space stations. Jake's crew had grown to include liberated humans from across the Empire. Former pilots flew captured alien fighters while engineers maintained modified Kethmori technology. They moved through space like ghosts, striking at Imperial forces and vanishing before retaliation could arrive. "Sir, we've lost contact with 3 more patrol ships," Admiral Thekmor reported to the Emperor. "The humans are using our own technology against us with impossible efficiency." "How does a blind creature navigate space battles?" Emperor Zarthik demanded. "Intelligence suggests he can detect our ship's electromagnetic signatures from tremendous distances. Our stealth systems seem to be useless against him," the Admiral explained. Jake proved this during a climactic battle in the asteroid belt around Kepler 442b. The Emperor's flagship attempted to use holographic decoys and sensor jammers to confuse the human forces. Instead, Jake's enhanced awareness allowed him to identify the real ship immediately while the decoys fooled his opponents. The battle was fierce, with Kethmori forces using their superior numbers and firepower to pressure Jake's smaller fleet. But the humans fought with desperate courage while their leaders seemed to predict every enemy move. Jake directed the battle from his command ship, using captured alien technology to coordinate attacks with surgical precision. "Target their primary weapon array. Hit them now while their shields are rotating," Jake commanded. Somehow, knowing the exact moment when the Emperor's flagship would be vulnerable, his pilots struck with perfect timing, crippling the massive Kethmori vessel and forcing it to retreat. The Emperor's invincible fleet had been defeated by a force of liberated slaves, led by a blind human who refused to accept defeat. Emperor Zarthik stared at the tactical displays showing his damaged ships fleeing from human forces. For the first time in centuries, he felt something he had almost forgotten: uncertainty. This Jake Morrison represented something the Kethmori Empire had never encountered before. "Admiral, prepare the Fortress Moon of Thekvar for siege conditions. If this human wants to challenge our empire, he will have to come to us," the Emperor ordered. Jake received word of the Emperor's retreat through his intelligence network. The Fortress Moon was the most heavily defended position in Kethmori space, protected by energy shields and automated defense systems. Most commanders would consider it an impossible target, but Jake Morrison was no longer just a commander. He had become something new, something the Empire had created through their own cruelty. They had tried to break him by taking his sight, and found that they had forged a weapon capable of bringing down their entire civilization. "Danny, Lisa, Helen, gather the team leaders," Jake said as he studied tactical reports from the Fortress Moon. "It's time to plan our final assault. We're going to show Emperor Zarthik what happens when you try to crush the human spirit." His enhanced senses could already detect the electromagnetic signatures of the fortress's defenses through intercepted communications. The Emperor thought his stronghold was impregnable, but to Jake's awareness, every defense system was just another puzzle to solve. The Dark Commander was coming for the throne, and no amount of alien technology would stop him. News of Jake Morrison's victory over Sub-Commander Krextel spread beyond the mining complex on Kepler 442b, human slaves across the Kethmori Empire whispered about the blind commander who could fight like he had perfect sight. The story grew, with each telling giving hope to workers who had forgotten what freedom felt like. Jake used his growing reputation to establish contact with resistance cells on other worlds. With help from Danny Rodriguez, a former Earth Fleet engineer who had been captured during the invasion of Mars, Jake learned to modify Kethmori communication equipment. The aliens were so confident in their superiority that they never expected slaves to understand their technology. "Their systems are more complex than ours, but they follow the same basic principles," Danny explained as they worked in a hidden chamber deep in the mines. Once you understand the frequency patterns, you can piggyback on their network. Jake's enhanced hearing allowed him to detect the subtle electronic signals that others missed. He could identify different types of Kethmori equipment by their unique electromagnetic signatures. This ability became crucial as they built their underground communication network. The first successful contact came from a labor camp on Proxima. Centauri B. Lisa Thompson, a former Marine who had lost her entire unit during Earth's defense, had organized the workers there into a disciplined fighting force. Her transmission was weak but clear. "Morrison, is that really you? We heard you were dead." Lisa's voice crackled through the jury-rigged communicator. "Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated," Jake replied with a slight smile. "What's your situation there?" 2,000 humans mining rare earth elements. Light security, but they've got automated defense systems. "We're ready to move when you give the word," Lisa reported. Over the following weeks, Jake made contact with 11 more slave colonies. Each had its own challenges and resources, but all shared the same desperate desire for freedom. Jake coordinated their efforts, sharing intelligence about Kethmori weaknesses and tactical information. The aliens had made a critical error in their treatment of human prisoners. They separated people by skill rather than keeping military units together, thinking this would prevent organized resistance. Instead, it spread Earth fleet training throughout their slave population. Engineers, pilots, Marines, and officers found themselves scattered across different worlds, each teaching their skills to civilian workers. Jake discovered that Kethmori technology created distinctive electromagnetic patterns that his enhanced senses could identify. Their weapons had a specific frequency signature when charging. Their vehicles produced recognizable vibration patterns. Even their armor generated detectable energy fields. This gave him an unprecedented advantage in combat and planning. "You're reading their technology like it's written in a language only you can understand?" Helen observed as Jake explained the electromagnetic signatures to other resistance leaders. "Maybe that's exactly what it is," Jake replied thoughtfully. The Kethmori rely so heavily on visual intimidation that they never considered someone might detect their equipment through other senses. The breakthrough came when Jake intercepted communications revealing a planned inspection tour by General Vexthara himself. The alien commander was visiting mining operations to investigate reports of declining efficiency and worker unrest. Jake saw this as the perfect opportunity to strike. He coordinated with resistance cells on 3 different worlds, timing their uprisings to occur simultaneously during Vexthara's visit to the Kepler system. The plan required precise timing and flawless execution. If any group moved too early or too late, the entire operation would fail. Jake trained his people to fight using the same enhanced awareness techniques he had developed. They learned to move silently through tunnels, to detect enemies by sound and smell, and to use the aliens' overconfidence against them. Most importantly, they learned to fight as a coordinated unit instead of desperate individuals. The day of the uprising, Jake positioned himself in the main mining complex where Vexthara was expected to arrive. His people were hidden throughout the facility, waiting for his signal. Through the communication network, he could monitor the other operations in real time. "Proxima team in position," Lisa reported. "Titan station ready," came another voice. "Alpha Centauri standing by," confirmed a third team leader. Jake could hear the approaching Kethmori transport ships through the rock above them. The distinctive whine of their engines was unmistakable to his enhanced senses. General Vexthara was arriving with a full escort, expecting to find broken slaves and increased productivity. Instead, he would find a coordinated rebellion led by the human he thought he had destroyed. "All teams, this is Morrison. Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves today. We're fighting for every human who died believing we had given up. We're fighting for every person still in chains who dreams of freedom. Today we show the Kethmori that humanity doesn't stay down." The first explosions rocked the mining complex as hidden charges severed key support structures. Jake had mapped every critical point in the facility, knowing exactly where to strike for maximum effect. The aliens' own mining equipment was turned against them as tunnels, collapsed and trapped their forces in isolated sections. Simultaneously, uprisings erupted on 3 other worlds. The resistance fighters used captured Kethmori weapons and their superior knowledge of the facilities to overwhelm surprised guards. What should have been routine inspections turned into disasters for the alien forces. General Vexthara found himself trapped in the same mining complex where he had once tortured Jake Morrison. His elite guards were being picked off one by enemies they couldn't see coming. The sophisticated sensors in their armor were useless against opponents who moved like ghosts through familiar territory. Jake appeared in the main command center like a specter from Vexthara's nightmares. The alien general stared in shock at the blind human who had somehow escaped death and built an army from broken slaves. "Impossible," Vexthara snarled. "You should be dead." "I destroyed your eyes myself." "You took my sight," Jake said calmly, moving through the darkened command center with perfect confidence. "But you couldn't touch what makes me human. You couldn't break my spirit or kill my hope. And now your empire is going to learn what happens when you underestimate humanity." The battle for the command center was fierce but brief. Jake's enhanced senses allowed him to anticipate every move while Vexthara struggled to track an enemy, who seemed to vanish and reappear at will. When the alien general finally fell, Jake stood over him with captured Kethmori weapons pointed at his head. "Your emperor needs to know that humanity is no longer broken," Jake said into the facility's communication system. "Tell him that the slaves he thought were conquered have become something far more dangerous. Tell him that we're coming for him next." Jake Morrison woke in complete darkness, his head pounding with pain that felt like molten metal had been poured into his skull. He tried to open his eyes but felt nothing, no sensation at all where his eyes should be. Panic filled his chest as he realized the terrible truth of what had happened to him. "Easy there, soldier. You're safe now," a woman's voice said softly from somewhere nearby. Jake tried to sit up, but his body felt weak and unfamiliar. His hands went to his face and found smooth scar tissue where his eyes had been. The memory of General Vexthara and the neural disruptor came flooding back. "Where am I?" Jake asked, his voice coming out as a hoarse whisper. "Underground on Kepler 442b. My name is Helen Carter. I was a neuroscientist before the Kethmori took Earth's colonies. Now I'm just another slave in their mining operation," she explained. Jake felt around with his hands and discovered he was lying on a simple cot in what seemed to be a small cave. The air smelled of dust and dampness with an underlying metallic tang. He could hear the distant sound of machinery and the echo of voices in tunnels. "How long was I unconscious?" he asked. 6 months. The Kethmori dumped you here after they finished with you. They thought you were as good as dead," Helen said. "But humans are tougher than they give us credit for." Over the following days, Helen helped Jake learn to navigate his new reality. She explained that the mining complex was built into a series of natural caves, with human workers forced to extract rare crystals that powered Kethmori technology. The aliens had overseers watching the workers, but the underground tunnels were so extensive that they couldn't monitor everything. Jake discovered that his other senses had begun to sharpen in ways he never imagined possible. He could hear conversations from incredible distances and distinguish between different footsteps even when they were far away. The vibrations in the rock told him when heavy machinery was operating and how many people were moving through nearby tunnels. "Your brain is adapting," Helen explained during one of their conversations. "When you lose one sense, the others compensate. But what's happening to you is remarkable. I've never seen adaptation this rapid or complete." The alien overseer in their section was a Kethmori named Sub-Commander Krextall. He was smaller than General Vexthara, but still towered over the human workers. Krextall viewed Jake as a broken tool and assigned him to the most dangerous deep mines where cave-ins were common and toxic gases could kill without warning. But Jake's enhanced senses made him uniquely suited for this environment. He could detect structural weaknesses in the rock by the way sound traveled through it. He could smell gas leaks before they became dangerous and feel air currents that warned of unstable areas. The other workers began to notice that Jake seemed to know things He shouldn't be able to know. When he warned them to avoid certain tunnels, they listened. When he said a section was about to collapse, they evacuated. Soon they started calling him their guardian angel. Jake used his military training to organize the workers into efficient teams. He mapped the entire underground complex in his mind, remembering every tunnel, every intersection, every hiding place. He learned the guard rotations and identified the blind spots in Kethmori surveillance. "We can't keep living like this," Jake told a group of workers during a secret meeting in an abandoned mine shaft. "These aliens think we're just animals to be worked to death. But we're human beings and we deserve better." Some of the workers were afraid to resist. They had seen what happened to humans who defied their alien masters. But Jake's quiet confidence and growing reputation gave them hope. He wasn't asking them to fight yet, just to be ready. Sub-Commander Krextal became suspicious when productivity in the deep mines improved instead of declining despite the dangerous conditions. He began watching Jake more carefully, trying to understand how a blind human could be so effective in the tunnels. The confrontation came when Krextal discovered Jake teaching other workers to move silently through the caves. The alien overseer was furious that slaves were being trained in what looked like military tactics. He decided to make an example of the blind human. "You think you are clever, damaged human?" Krextal hissed as his guards surrounded Jake in one of the main chambers. "But you are nothing. Less than nothing." Jake stood calmly in the center of the circle, his head tilted slightly as he listened to the alien's breathing and heartbeat. Krextal was angry but also nervous. The other guards were positioned exactly where Jake had predicted they would be. "My name is Morrison," Jake said quietly, "and I'm still a soldier in Earth Fleet." Krextal lunged forward with his energy weapon raised, expecting to crush the blind human easily. But Jake was no longer the broken prisoner who had arrived 6 months ago. He moved with fluid grace, his enhanced senses guiding every step. He could hear the weapon's power cell humming and feel the heat radiating from its barrel. The fight was over in seconds. Jake disarmed the alien overseer and used his own momentum against him, sending Krextal crashing into the cave wall. The other guards stood frozen in shock as their superior lay unconscious at the feet of a blind human. "Anyone else want to try?" Jake asked, turning toward the guards. The younger Kethmori warriors looked at each other uncertainly. They had been taught that humans were weak and inferior, but what they had just witnessed challenged everything they believed. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Word of Jake's victory spread through the mining complex like wildfire. For the first time since the Kethmori conquest, humans had stood up to their oppressors and won. The blind commander who fought like he could see everything had given them something they thought was lost forever. Hope. Jake Morrison gripped the command chair as the UES Defiant shook under enemy fire. Red warning lights flashed across the bridge while his crew worked frantically at their stations. The alien ships had appeared without warning near Jupiter's orbital stations, their sleek black hulls cutting through space like sharks in dark water. "Status report," Jake called out to his tactical officer. 12 enemy vessels confirmed, sir." "They're bigger than anything in our database." "Our weapons are barely scratching their shields," Lieutenant Peters replied, sweat beading on his forehead. Jake studied the view screen showing the massive alien ships. Each one was 3 times the size of his cruiser, covered in what looked like crystalline armor that seemed to absorb their laser fire. Strange energy weapons lanced out from the alien vessels, punching through human shields like they were made of paper. "All ships, this is Morrison. Focus fire on the lead vessel. Target their weapon systems." He transmitted to the other human ships in the battle group. The aliens had been silent since their arrival, ignoring all attempts at communication. They simply attacked with ruthless efficiency, their formation moving in perfect coordination. Jake had been on patrol with 5 other Earth Fleet vessels when the enemy appeared. Now only 2 ships remained operational. The Defiant's hull groaned as another energy blast struck their port side. Sparks flew from damaged consoles and the lights flickered. Jake could smell burning circuits and feel the heat from overloaded systems. "Sir, we're losing life support on decks 4 and 5. Engineering reports main power at 30%. Chief Martinez called from the engineering station. Jake watched as the used Guardian exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Captain Davis and his crew of 200 were gone in an instant. The alien weapons were unlike anything humans had encountered before, seeming to tear apart matter at the molecular level. All remaining ships, this is Morrison. Fall back to Jupiter Station. We need to warn Earth about this threat, he ordered, but the aliens had anticipated this move. 3 of their ships blocked the retreat route while the others continued their methodical destruction of human forces. Jake realized they were trapped. The bridge shuddered again as direct hits pounded their weakening shields. Through the smoke and chaos, Jake saw something that chilled him to the bone. The largest alien ship was moving directly toward them, its weapon systems charging for what looked like a finishing blow. "Sir, incoming transmission," Communications Officer Kelly announced. "Put it through," Jake said. The main screen flickered and showed the interior of an alien bridge. The creature that appeared was 9 feet tall with gray reptilian skin and 4 arms. It wore elaborate crystalline armor that pulsed with inner light. When it spoke, the words came through the universal translator in a cold, emotionless voice. "Human. Commander, you will surrender immediately or face total destruction." Jake stood up slowly, his jaw set in determination. "This is Lieutenant Commander Morrison of Earth Fleet. We will not surrender to unprovoked aggressors." The alien tilted its massive head, studying Jake with large black eyes that showed no emotion. "I am General Vextara of the Kathmori Empire. Your species has been deemed inferior and suitable only for slave labor. Surrender now and some of your crew may survive." "Go to hell," Jake replied firmly. Vextara made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your defiance is noted, human. You will learn the price of resistance." The transmission ended and the alien assault resumed with increased fury. The Defiant's shields collapsed under the barrage and hull breaches began venting atmosphere into space. Jake ordered all remaining crew to emergency stations as systems failed throughout the ship. "Sir, they're boarding us." "Multiple breaches on all decks," Martinez reported. Jake drew his sidearm and moved toward the bridge entrance. "All hands, repel boarders. Fight them at every bulkhead." The sound of energy weapons echoed through the ship's corridors as human Marines engaged the alien invaders. Jake could hear the distinctive whine of Kathmori weapons and the screams of his crew. The aliens were cutting through human defenses like they were nothing. Heavy footsteps approached the bridge and the main doors exploded inward. Armored Kathmori warriors poured through the breach, their energy rifles trained on the remaining bridge crew. Jake raised his weapon, but a stunning blast knocked him to the deck. General Vextara stepped onto the bridge, his massive frame filling the doorway. He looked down at Jake with those emotionless black eyes and spoke in perfect English. "You fought well for an inferior species, human commander, but your resistance ends here." Jake struggled to stand, blood running down his face from the stunning blast. "My name is Morrison, and humanity will never bow to aliens like you." Vextara gestured to his warriors, who grabbed Jake's arms and forced him to his knees. The alien general leaned down until his face was inches from Jake's. "Your name no longer matters, human. You will serve as an example to others who think to resist the Kathmori Empire. Since you refuse to see reason, you will see nothing at all." The general raised a device that hummed with malevolent energy. Jake tried to pull away, but the warriors held him firm. The last thing he saw was Vextara's cruel smile before agony exploded through his skull and the world went black forever.